According to Wikipedia, Peter Scoly is one of the most evil criminals to ever be documented online, and the more you read, the worse it gets. Back in the early 2010s, Scoly was operating in the Philippines, producing what's been described as some of the most horrifying illegal content ever made. And that's not a hyperbole. The article outlines how he created a dark web pay-per-view platform where people could pay thousands to watch unspeakable acts. One of the most notorious videos known by investigators as Daisy's deconstruction was so graphic that even seasoned officers reportedly had trouble speaking about it afterward. Wikipedia also mentions that Scoly was originally from Australia, where he had already been investigated for fraud before fleeing to Southeast Asia. Once there, he used vulnerable families and street children to build an underground empire of abuse. In the most disturbing parts, he recorded everything. The court documents alone were so graphic, many of them had to be sealed. But the article doesn't just focus on the crimes, it also details how investigators finally tracked him down in 2015. Scoly was sentenced to life in prison, but the damage he caused can't be undone. This page is so dark it even contains a warning about disturbing content. And honestly, that's an understatement. This is one of those pages that feels like it should be fictional, but it's not. According to Wikipedia, Armin Maiwis is a German man who in 2001 posted an online ad looking for someone willing to be eaten. Not metaphorically, literally. And even more bizarrely, someone actually responded. The article explains that a man named Bernd Barndez agreed voluntarily to take part in Armin's disturbing fantasy. The two met up, had dinner, and what happened next is so unsettling it reads like a horror movie. After giving consent, Brandes reportedly let Armin carry out the acts, filming the entire process. The footage has never been released to the public for obvious reasons, but the court documents describe it in shocking detail. What makes the case so complicated and so disturbing is the legal gray area it initially created. Because the victim agreed, Armin was first convicted of manslaughter, not murder. Later, after public outrage and a retrial, the sentence was upgraded to life in prison. Wikipedia even links to archived court statements where Armin insists he didn't believe he was doing anything wrong. He described the act as a form of love, which somehow makes it even more disturbing. At first glance, the Wikipedia article on Lena Medina doesn't seem like it belongs on this list, until you realize what it's actually saying. According to the page, in 1939, a 5-year-old girl in Peru was taken to a hospital because her stomach was growing abnormally. Doctors first thought it was a tumor, but it wasn't. She was 7 months pregnant. Her name was Lena Medina, and she remains the youngest confirmed mother in medical history. The article explains that she was born in a poor remote village in the Andes and developed an extremely rare condition called precocious puberty, which caused her reproductive system to mature years ahead of schedule. But the real mystery and horror lies in what the page doesn't fully explain. To this day, the identity of the father is unknown. Wikipedia mentions that her own father was briefly arrested, but released for lack of evidence. Nina, at just 5 years old, reportedly never revealed who harmed her, and the case was never solved. The article includes medical photographs and x-rays from the time, used as parts of medical journals, but reading through the pages leaves you with an overwhelming sense of unease. It's not just tragic, it's the kind of story that makes you question how something like this could even happen and be left unresolved. The Wikipedia page on the murder of Junka Feruna is almost too horrifying to read in full. According to the article, in 1988, a 17-year-old Japanese girl was kidnapped by 4 boys. For the next 44 days, she was kept in a suburban home, where she was tortured in ways that are difficult to even describe. The Wikipedia article includes a timeline of what she endured, from repeated beatings to unimaginable abuse. What makes this even more chilling is that the parents of one of the boys lived in the house where she was being held, and allegedly did nothing to stop it. Eventually, her captors beat her so badly she couldn't move, and when her injuries became too severe, they put her in a concrete drum and left her for dead. The article goes in painful detail about how the crime was covered up, how the boys were initially protected by being underage, and how despite the horrors of what they did, none of them received life sentences. This isn't just a disturbing Wikipedia page, it's one of the darkest true crime cases ever documented online, and somehow it's not as widely known as it should be. This is one of those Wikipedia articles that reads like a conspiracy theory, but every entry on it is real. The page lists dozens of documented instances where the US government, military, or medical institutions conducted non-consensual experiments on their own citizens, and many of these went on for years before anyone found out. There's the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study, where black men were told that they were receiving treatment, but were actually left to suffer so doctors could study the long-term effects of untreated syphilis. There is the radiation experiments in the 50s, where patients were secretly exposed to harmful levels of radiation, often without being told. But it gets worse. In the Cold War era, the CIA ran a program called MK Ultra, where people, including prisoners and psychiatric patients, were dosed with LSD and other drugs in attempts to study mind control. The Wikipedia article explains that some people were dosed for weeks at a time without even knowing what was happening. The scariest part, most of these programs were covered up for decades. Some files were destroyed, and many of the victims never received justice. Reading the full article is like scrolling through a list of real horror stories, only instead of fiction, every one of them is backed by declassified government records. Few Wikipedia pages are as unsettling as the story of Carl Tanler, a case so bizarre and disturbing it's hard to believe it actually happened. According to the article, Tanler was a radiologist in Key West during the 1930s who became obsessed with a young tuberculosis patient named Lena Medina. He believed she was his destiny, a vision he claims came to him in dreams. But when Lena died at just 21 years old, Tanler didn't let it go. In fact, he refused to. The page explains how 2 years after her death, he broke into her mausoleum and removed her body, bringing it home and attempting to preserve her, using wires, plaster, wax, and glass eyes. For the next 7 years, he lived with her corpse, slept beside it, dressed it, talked to it. When authorities finally discovered what he had done, the public reaction was split. Some saw him as a twisted monster, others romanticized it as a tragic love story, which somehow makes the whole thing even creepier. The Wikipedia article doesn't hold back. It details how Tanler created a life-sized effigy of the woman he lost, refusing to let death or decay separate them. It's one of those cases where obsession turns into something truly unsettling and deeply disturbing. This is one of the shortest entries on the list, but it might be the most gut-wrenching. According to Wikipedia, Kelly Ann Bates was a 17-year-old girl from the UK who died in 1996. But her story doesn't begin here. It begins when she was just 14 and started dating a man nearly 3 decades older than her, 48-year-old James Patterson Smith. The article outlines how over the next several years, Smith isolated and manipulated her until she was completely under his control. What followed, according to the postmortem, was nearly a month of psychiatric torture. The list of injuries is almost too horrifying to comprehend, including malnutrition, scalding, starvation, and repeated beatings. Jurors at Smith's trial were offered counseling due to the graphic nature of the evidence. The forensic psychologist described it as the worst case of abuse they've ever seen. But what makes this article so chilling isn't just the violence, it's how long it went unnoticed, how friends and family were pushed away, how someone could inflict this much suffering on another human being without the world realizing it was happening. The Wikipedia page is blunt, clinical, and hard to read, but it's a reminder that real-life monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they live right next door, and no one sees the horror until it's too late. She wasn't given a name at first, not even a voice. To the world, she became known only as Genie, a symbol, a human experiment. Born in 1957, Genie spent the first 13 years of her life locked in a single dark room in Arcady, California, isolated from nearly all human contact. She was strapped to a potty chair for most of the day and bound inside a sleeping bag at night. Her father forbade anyone from speaking to her. If she made a sound, she was beaten. By the time authorities found her in 1970, she couldn't speak, couldn't walk properly, and had the mental development of a toddler. Her discovery became a media sensation and a magnet for scientists. News of Genie reached major media outlets on November 17, receiving intense local and national attention. The one photo released of her, thin, wide-eyed, and clearly afraid, fueled the public's fascination. Crowds gathered outside her home. People wanted to see her father. They wanted answers, but the pressure proved too much. On the morning of November 20th, just before he was scheduled to appear in court on child abuse charges, Genie's father took his own life. Police found 2 suicide notes, one addressed to his son saying, "Be a good boy, I love you," and another directed at the police, containing a chilling message: the world will never understand. In his absence, Genie became the center of a storm. Linguists, psychologists, and doctors saw her in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, a living test case for the clinical period hypothesis, the theory that there's a limited window in childhood to acquire language. She was moved into a hospital and then foster homes. But what began as research quickly turned into something darker. Competing teams of research fought over her custody. She was poked, tested, filmed, recorded. Her traumatic life became a scientific playground. And then, just abruptly, she was discarded. Funding dried up. The study stopped. She was returned to a dysfunctional foster system and eventually vanished from the public eye. As of now, Genie is believed to be alive, living in a private care facility in Southern California. Her Wikipedia article isn't just disturbing because of what happened to her. It's disturbing because it shows how easily a person can be reduced to an object, a test, a case file, a headline. And just like her father wrote, the world will never understand. Safe to say, I'm never going on random Wikipedia pages again.